my ability to code was plagued by so much imposter syndrome.
I love having a positive representation of AI in the industry, like something that is actually doing good. Said I definitely have some abilities to code. It's kind of what you lean into of what you want to learn at the time. It's trying to focus on the few things that I want to make an impact on.
I can just kind of say something like, "Hey, this is my component and it does this and I want to do this other thing." It's like, "Oh, okay. This is how you could do it."
Hey, welcome to Cocoy.ai, where we talk about career advice, creative outlet making, money, monetization, growth mindset, and the future to help guide creative folks through leadership, tech, and finding what makes them happiest in life. Laura Holmes, who we have great conversations. I could talk to you for days as a mom, as a person that's delving into this AI and children's book illustration and writing. Laura has been developing Wanderly, which is an amazing choose your own adventure book geared towards what is the age range, would you say?
Right now, I'm keeping it pretty lax where it's like ages 3 through 12.
Okay.
I think the sweet spot right now for where the product is 3 through 8, but I also have a number of users who are in that, 4th, 5th, 6th grade range who are not quite at grade level when it comes to reading. And so they found Wanderly to actually be really helpful for kids who might have dyslexia or ADHD.
That is so awesome. I'm wondering if you can tell my audience a little bit of what got you started at Wanderly and how did this come to be?
It's a great question. So I think it's worth mentioning that I started working in ed tech about 8 years ago. It started when I was actually really passionate, and still am passionate about diversity and inclusion in tech. And my own journey to computer science was one that a lot of people looked at me and said, I don't think you can code, which was not very fun to experience, but it was mostly because there was all these artificial blockers and gateways that just people didn't they used jargon to keep people out. And so when I was thinking about what can I do to help with diversity and inclusion, I thought, well, maybe I can teach more people to code. Maybe people who look like me or from underrepresented backgrounds. And so I started in working in ed tech and created Grasshopper, which teaches adults and children how to code on their mobile phones, which was very fun. And it was very different from the previous things I'd worked on at Google, where Google's, standard products that produce money usually have pretty standard metrics around how to measure things. We understand what we're trying to do here. And I remember the first 6 months I was working on Grasshopper and I talked to someone who was an educational evaluator. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm going to hire you, but I need you to produce some graphs, some data for me to convince the executives that people are learning using Grasshopper. And this woman was infinitely patient with me. And she said, well, here's the thing about education, it's not quite measurable in the way that you want it to be. Education measurement is more of an art than a science. And I was like, oh no. But I fell in love with it because it's the impact is so strong. My mom was actually a middle school math teacher for many years. And yeah, I just worked in ed tech for a while. And then back about 2 years ago, I left Google and decided to pursue my own thing. And I kind of bumbled around for a little bit. I wasn't really quite sure what I wanted to do. Had a brief dally in crypto. I wrote an NFT from scratch. That was very fun. But gosh, what was it? December, November of 2022 is when ChatGPT and Midjourney just really started to pop off. And it was super fun. And I ended up that Christmas season gave presents to the kids in my life of customized Midjourney art for them. It was like pinging my friends saying like, "Hey, what's your kid's favorite animal?" And I'll just, do some fun art for them. And I ended up building out an Etsy shop for customized children's art. And then also a friend encouraged me and said like, Laura, these chat tools, they're way more accessible than you probably think they are. I think you can maybe code something up that's pretty fun there. At the time, my daughter was actually going through some play therapy, which was, just I think having a good early relationship with therapy is a really positive thing because it just kind of means like when you need it, it's there. So we had her going through that, and we realized that you could actually do something that's a little bit like play therapy when it comes to telling a story with your kid. And I also started as going through this, realizing that one of the things that my mom used to do with me when I was a kid was that she would crawl into bed with me and she'd be saying like, okay, once upon a time there was a princess named Laura, and she was traveling too, and then it was up to me to fill in the blank. And so that's kind of where Wanderly got started. Is I had these couple of inputs, and then these tools from Midjourney and OpenAI kind of mashing up together into, wow, I can actually make this into a tool so that every family can have access to this kind of imaginative play storytelling together. So that's kind of where I want Wanderly to go. And yeah,
That's
it's kind of rooted in
amazing.
my
I
love of
love
education.
that story of your mom telling you the stories, and she must be so creative. She must have all of these different pathways for you to go on your princess journey.
I think it's fun that, I mean, I think it's partially creativity, but I also think it's a lack of ego. It's this, I think there's this thing, at least for me as an adult, that I struggle sometimes with like, well, is it the right answer? It's like kids don't care, but sometimes I get in my own way. And my mom is my hero in so many ways, and she does so many things in service of other people. Where she was telling me that story, she didn't know where it was going to go, but she also had no ego about it because she just wanted to do something fun for me. And so my hope with Wanderly myself was that I could maybe reproduce some of those experiences, but with a tool so I didn't let my own ego get in the way of not telling my daughter a personalized and fun story.
I mean, you're speaking my language. When you say fun, that is my almost my number one value. It's kind of how I live my life. I feel like instilling that in our kids and keeping that fun alive is so important. I'm wondering if you have seen with your kid some of the same magic that you experience as with your mom when she tries out the Wanderly app.
It's a great question. I think it really has been more of an evolution in some sense. I think when I first experienced Wanderly with Alana, she was hooked. We ended up doing it like a 20-minute session. It was super, super fun. But kids always, they have no reservations about asking for what they want. And so what's actually been really fun about almost like co-developing this with my daughter is that she always has future requests. And so there's this kind of wild abandon of her imagination where she's not afraid to ask for things, but those things are getting progressively more complicated, or at least trying to get my prototype into a spot where I can iterate quickly on it so I can meet what she wants to do is, I'm making progress on it.
Does
So
she
for the
know that your son that she has this awesome mom that can make these things happen and that it does take a lot of work for it to become real?
I think she's more upset about the fact that sometimes there's bugs
Oh,
than
no.
anything. Because I mean, kids, you just don't have really a reference point. It's not odd that, or different, that mom knows how to code or is coding an app for her, right? But yeah, so for several months, she's been asking me, to I had it so that you could add a friend or a
Mhm.
companion that was a person, or that you could add a pet. And she was like, "Mom, I just really wanna be able to go on an adventure with my pet Phoenix Midnight Jelly Bean and my friend Olivia." And I was like, "Oh, that's gonna take a while."
But you did it. You did it.
But I
We
did
tried that this morning. My kids tried that. They were on the adventure together, Mason and Maxine, with their pet red panda named Tree.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yes! Yay, awesome. Well, I launched that about a week and a half ago. So,
Amazing. So
yeah,
it didn't
yeah.
even exist the first time I tried it.
Oh, maybe, yeah. So I mean, we have these moments where I mean, okay, real talk, we had norovirus this past weekend, right? She was puking so much and at like weird hours, and her friends were upstairs and she wanted to hang out with them, and she was also really scared of throwing up. She wanted to like cover her eyes because she didn't want to
Mm.
see things and was just really generally really nervous. And I was like, do you want a distraction? And I was like, yeah, okay. Well, I could kind of zombie her out with YouTube, but that runs the risk of her being so into the YouTube that if she needs to throw up, it's
Oh,
it's
it's
its
on the
own
YouTube.
separate but so we did Wanderly stories, right? And that kept her engaged and entertained, but also in touch with her body enough that when she did need to throw up, we could take a pause and take care of that. Those kind of moments is nice where it's like, hey, we're having a connective moment, even though you're feeling bad. And it's through this tool that I made for her. And that's just, it's really special.
It's so special. I know she's 6 or almost 6, and,
Mhm.
I know for my daughter, last summer was the first summer that we put her in, like, summer camp, and I put her in this Pokemon kind of getting introduced to coding camp. She was one of 2 girls in the whole class. Are you exposing your daughter to some of the concepts in, like, computer science, or is that important?
Yes and no. I am of the opinion I've seen things like TikToks of this 4-year-old kid doing JavaScript stuff, and I'm just like, "Wow, I know I've worked with enough people to know that is hard to do, no matter what age you are." So I'm like, "Behind the scenes, how much did you have to work with your kid in order to make that TikTok video happen?" And I feel like there's this beautiful time in kids' lives where they aren't encumbered by expectation, and I kinda wanna preserve that for as long as possible. If she's interested in something, great, but I'm not gonna put her into an experience where it's like, "Well, you have to code this or else something bad is going to happen," or "You're gonna let us down," or there's a lot of ways that you can expose your kids to coding without those narratives, but if you're not there controlling the narrative, I worry about it. That's me, nervous parent.
Oh, I understand. I mean, this one, she couldn't read last summer. I mean, she can barely read now, but it was more about Legos. So it's the building blocks of things. It's not even the main reason is my son is super into coding and I could drop them off at the same place.
Oh, and I think that's great. I think if your daughter is into it,
Mhm.
great, and if they're not pushing something that's cognitively, out of reach, great. So to also answer your question, I am introducing my daughter to some coding stuff, right?
Mm,
But it's through something that she's, like, potentially interested in. So I have an Arduino nightlight that
mm,
we program together. And we get to figure out she tells me, like, what kind of pattern she wants in the nightlight and what colors, and we'll work on it together. I'm like, "Hey, you see this? This is how this works, and this is how we create a color, and this is, kind of what a loop is." But I'm not forcing her to
mm,
do anything she doesn't wanna do. I'm mostly just explaining things as they go along. And then sometimes she'll, look at me coding and she'll want to say like, well, what does this do? And you just kind of answer it. So I think there are two paths you can go down. And it sounds like you're going down the right path, which is interested, finding things that are at the right cognitive development stage. But then there's also this like parent who says like, I'm going to get my kid coding as early as possible because it's a life skill and they need to do that. And that's just kind of setting a bunch of expectations on the kid. And I can see that backfiring. And also, I when I first started teaching coding, before I got into it, I did a booth at the Maker Faire. This is just kind of more of a story about how like a parent's opinion just means the world to kids. And so I had this nightlight idea, and I would have people. So I had this sign up that says like "Learn to code in a minute or less." And I had a couple of like I had some helper functions, and some people would come up and they would like code their nightlight. Had this guy who was wearing a bunch of like fraternity clothes come up, and he just started laughing when he realized that like what he had coded was showing up in the nightlight in front of him. He was just just awestruck. It was just these really kind of cool transformative moments. And we had people from all ages. So I think the youngest was 5 years old and the oldest was probably 90. And I
mm.
just will always remember this little 7 or 8-year-old girl who came to our booth and was programming the nightlight and was so excited and just was really proud of herself. And then her daddy came up and she was like, "Daddy, daddy, look, I'm coding." And he looks at what we're doing, he looks at her and he's like, "That's not real coding. Let's go." And you
What?
could just see how crestfallen she was. And it was like, well, why do we need to have these barriers, right? Why does a child's joy need to be put down by some perception of what coding is or isn't? It's really about more about how the parent perceives their role in a coding education. kind of thing? Is it supportive and curious, or is it trying to like meet some weird bar? If it's the latter, I think it's actually counterproductive.
Yeah, I mean, it's like soul crushing. It's making me very sad. I saw this, I think it's on Instagram. I might follow this teacher that gets these really funny answers to, like, there's a picture and they get a word written in. And then she's in it too. She thinks it's funny, but she's crossing it out and saying it's wrong. And that's how creativity dies, or that's where the joy dies when you're like,
Yeah.
it is what that image is, it's what that kid thought that image is. Maybe it's the image, you know? Like, why is that wrong? And it's like with the red marker pen and a -1, I'm like, "Oh, you know it too. This describes this almost exactly."
One thing that we actually found when I was building Grasshopper was we worked with this educational evaluator and we had to look at all of our data anonymized. But she found that if a user got 2 quizzes wrong, they were going to leave the app forever, basically. And that we looked at our quiz UI and we're like, "Oh, man, we just put red all over the place when someone gets something wrong," right? And that doesn't feel good, right? If you're gonna tell me I'm wrong, then why am I here? As opposed to, "Hey, you know what? Let's use this as an educational moment and move forward." So we changed everything to gray and the language, and I think it helped our retention numbers. And I just really do think that when you fail, when you get something wrong, you're totally right. Creativity dies, which is
Mhm.
why, if we bring it back to I think it's so cool. Like, you can just the only time you're gonna get a, like, "We can't do that image," is if it's, like, outside the terms of use. You get ask kids, "What do you wanna get drawn?" And you're like, "Yeah, no." I think I remember my daughter asking for a mommy panticorn. And I was like, "I don't know what a mommy panticorn is, but let's find out."
Well,
And, you
what
know,
came out? What came out of the mommy
uh,
panda?
the mommy panticorn was mostly unicorn-esque, but had some it had some children, little baby, almost me type things, and I think it had 3 horns. Not 100%
But
sure.
at least it made something. It didn't block you for usage for my son, like, it I thought I was gonna get banned from Midjourney because he wanted to, prompt "poop poopity poop," and he did that, like, 15 times. He's like, "Mom, it's not working."
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like most of the boys in my daughter's kindergarten class.
He was 8 at the time, so, you know.
Well, the obsession with poop goes for a long time.
Yeah, forever.
Forever, yes, indeed. But I just think there's something really magical about these AI tools where it kind of allows imagination to go in any direction, and I think that, the more stuff that really utilizes it, I think it sparks joy. I saw it with your storybook.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, you found the edges of what these AI models are capable of now, but that's because you found something that was unique and interesting, right?
mhm.
And the next version is going to have more flexibility and be able to realize your vision even more. Like, that's gotta feel cool.
And I think that's kind of the key, kind of this idea, and that's what AI unlocks for me is this ability to be creative again in a way that you can get your ideas out there in a very tangible way. Like, yeah, maybe there's a lot of reprompting, but you're not stopped or blocked in any way. You can keep going on this path towards something tangible. And that's really exciting. I think this whole idea that you have with Wanderly, it's so tangible. You're creating this, the kid is creating this story as they're going along and being able to pick whatever they want, add the friends they want to go along that journey. I think it's deeply personal. I think I kind of wish I had the coding ability to be able to make it so that my kids could like make the story that they want to tell. It's both valid. Both are valid. My story and their story.
Totally, totally, and I think a place that I wanna get into as well is, being able to kind of steer the stories even more with a little more, like, world building and the type of things that I wanna see, but you just said a thing there of, like, you wish you could code, and I think that's also something probably worth touching on, which is that, 8 years ago, I started with this belief that everyone can learn to code. And I still feel pretty strongly about that. And I think that even and now, I think the tools are just getting better and better and easier and easier. I see the use of AI making it possible to create more and more complex things using code underneath, but facilitated through things like natural language. A friend is building an app. My understanding is that you can just kind of prompt your way into building an actual production app. It's pretty cool. I myself, I have a computer science degree, but I never really did it professionally. But now I code a lot with ChatGPT as my like co-pilot or pair programmer, where I can ask it so many questions and it's so patient with me. I can
Mhm.
just be like,
Absolutely.
infinitely patient. And so I found that my ability to code was plagued by so much imposter syndrome
Mm.
during my college education. And what I find now is that so much of that is melted away because I can ask infinite silly questions that aren't really that silly, but like, foundational questions that just, I wouldn't have asked someone in a professional context because I would have been worried about feeling uneducated or inexperienced. And now I can just ask someone who's infinitely patient. They're like, "Oh yeah, let me point out this tool for you that you may not have known about." And then I can ask as many follow-up questions as I want. I think the next generation of people who are learning to code, I think it's gonna be a lot more diverse. And I also think that more people who don't think of themselves as being able to code can produce things made with code, whether
That
you're
is
in the things or not.
maybe it's a little bit of a me stepping back on what I said. I definitely have some abilities to code. It's kind of what you lean into of what you want to learn at the time. I do feel like someone that is pretty okay with continuous learning. It would be something that I would want to focus on and like think about it and learn it as a means to an end, right? If I was trying to make something like a Wanderly, I would force myself into learning that particular skill. I don't know how your thoughts are on it, but for me, it's trying to focus on the few things that I want to make an impact on. And it's more of
Mm.
a like a more of a reasoning of narrowing what I want to learn right at this moment because there's an infinite possibility of learning. I have tried, like I've had ChatGPT come up with some pretty awesome HTML like website things. There it's pretty advanced, like with a very little amount of prompting and
Yeah.
just a little bit of danger from knowing what those things mean so I can fix it the way I want. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, and I find it too that it's for me, I started last February with I hadn't really seriously coded ever, really. I guess I had made this NFT. I'd taken some tutorials and like, made some and got some pointers from a friend. But as far as writing like production level code, I'd never done it ever, really. I think that it is really great at producing code. It's
Mhm.
also really great at being able to tweak things as you want. I can just kind of say something like, "Hey, this is my component and it does this and I want to do this other thing." It's like, "Oh, okay. This is how you can do it." Or here's the 5 different ways you can think about doing it. Which one do you want to do? And it's really empowering.
I think that you have just sparked my imposter syndrome because if I was to code anything, it would be on the dev branch. I would not be pushing anything to a production anything. Like, so I maybe that is my own thing. I would never feel ready enough to push it to production, and I think that's a imposter syndrome sparking its head, or maybe it's what you're talking about.
I mean, it's definitely, I pushed a change to production earlier today because there was a bug that I was trying to fix. But I think that what's been so when I was at Google, my shtick was building things from 0 to 1.
Mhm.
And because I was there for 13 years doing that, you just kinda get used to this idea of like, well, if you don't push ship, no one's ever gonna see it.
Right.
So I've kind of built up some, I guess, mechanisms around that. But then also, it's weird being a solopreneur in the
Mhm.
sense there's these things that I used to have to do at Google where it's like, okay, well, you want to launch something, fill out these, 15 forms and then get a bunch of reviews. And I wasn't even the one writing the code. I was just the one handling like the product development side of things. And then realizing that I'm more or less building this myself, I remember having a 6-month conversation about whether or not to put something in beta at my last role. And then this time I was like, "Do I wanna launch Wanderly under beta?" And then I was over lunch with my husband, and we were both like, "Yeah, that probably makes sense."
Ship it.
Decided. Ship it. So I think you kind of get this feeling of when you're doing the solopreneurship type stuff where it's just like, yeah, just ship it, and if it's broken, fix it quickly. But otherwise, I mean, if you think it's probably okay, nothing holding you back, so go for it.
Right. The
Um,
bugs. The bugs are the thing that hold me back.
I mean, the other thing is that with using ChatGPT, and I also use GitHub Copilot, that my code is way more robust than it would be if I was hand rolling it myself. There's definitely bugs, but the bugs are not as obvious,
Oh,
bugs. They might be more of, like, functional bugs rather than it being for instance, GitHub Copilot, it'll just auto-generate a bunch of error handling for you.
that's great.
It's beautiful, it's great. It makes code more robust and more resilient.
Will it also write documentation?
If you ask it to, yeah.
Oh,
Actually, one of the cool things about GitHub Copilot when I use it is that you can actually start with a comment and just describe what you want to have happen, and then it'll auto-generate the code for
that's
you.
amazing. I love
Yeah,
that.
isn't
Now
it
I
great?
wanna try it. Well, yeah, maybe by the next time we we talk, I'll try it.
That sounds great. If you want any, I've written up newsletter things about giving this all a shot. So if you want pointers, I got you.
That went by really fast. I feel like I will have to talk to you again on the podcast
Yes,
because
please.
I mean, this is a fascinating conversation. Being able to launch Wanderly, I think that is one of the things that I love having a positive representation of AI in the industry, like something that is
Mm,
actually doing good. And I think there's many different AI tools that are doing good, but this is one that I feel like will help children like and love reading and like seeing the stories that they produce. And so I really appreciate you joining for that. And I'd like to see like what are you most excited about
with Wanderly or with AI?
with both?
With okay, with both. I think with Wanderly, I have a number of things that are on my list that I'm just excited to build. I'm excited to kind of have more of that conversation with the child about you want this to happen? Well, here you go. The thing you wanted happened. Let's see what it did. This kind of this beautiful discovery of things together. I think that's kind of what makes ChatGPT and Midjourney and these tools addictive in some sense is that there's this element of randomness where you just kind of like roll the dice and just see what happens. And it kind of hits that kind of addictive loops a little bit, but it's so rewarding when you see it's like, yes, the thing that I was excited about, it's even more beautiful than I thought it could be. So I'm excited to, right now Wanderly is has some child input, but I want to expand it out even more. And then with the models and with AI, I'm sure this resonates with you given your own children's illustration stuff, but I'm excited for more consistency. Like some of
Mm.
the character consistency stuff I think will be just absolutely astonishingly cool. There's just where the models are right now is that having multiple characters and being consistent about them just is something they really, really struggle with. I'm even seeing it right now. I was doing this project for a nonprofit that does their doulas in San Francisco. And I was just trying to create images of a doula with a pregnant woman. And you got all these just terrible images of two pregnant women or a pregnant man and a pregnant woman. You're just like, oh, okay, model, like you understand what pregnancy is, but you don't understand that you want a non pregnant person helping a pregnant person. It just didn't quite get it. And so I'm excited to be able to do more, both with the images and also with the text. If you have a style that you really want to have adhered to, like let's have more of that. Right now I have to do a lot of massaging to get
Mhm.
things in the right place, which means that there's less creativity to be had in other places. So I'm excited for just the maturation of these tools. I think it'll be really fun.
Yeah, I'm wondering, have you tried kind of a similar model to what I was doing in my workflow where it's separate? Like you put the characters in separate from the background, it might be easier.
I've definitely thought about doing that, and that's might be on the candidate list for things I do in the future. But even so, like, it's just, you've mentioned yourself that you wanted more consistency even between the single characters. And I thought you did a really smart thing with your characters where you gave them distinctive characteristics. And I think
Mhm.
as long as you have those distinctive characteristics carried through the characters, then you're like, oh, I know which person that is, but I also know how you're kind of not as happy with, say, like the range of styles or just like little things, right? And to my eye, I didn't really notice them in the same way that you did, but I'm hoping that the next generation of tools will just make it really easy. It's like you want a specific style, we'll make it in that specific style with these specific characteristics consistently throughout. I think that's just going to uplevel the whole field.
Yeah, I can't wait. That's
Yeah, me too, right? And you asked, have I tried it or tried different things? And just think that there's a lot of tools, a lot of tutorials out there that talk about doing this. I honestly thought that your YouTube tutorial was one of the best ones that I've seen. Actually, very, very thoughtful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. It was really well done. But yeah, a lot of people trying to crack the nut, and few people being able to do it. I think just shows that there's a lot of interest in that space, a lot of need for people like you to push on the edges.
Yeah, and you too. What should everyone be reading or watching?
Great question. I can tell you what I'm watching or reading right now. We've been watching a bunch of different children's stuff. My eldest daughter just really got into Bluey recently.
Mhm.
I think had watched it here and there prior to this latest phase, but for some reason, something clicked in the last month or so. She's been watching Bluey, where Bluey's really good at imaginative play, almost like teaching parents and kids at the same time about how to do imaginative play. And so she's actually started playing the games from the show with us, and
Keepy
that was
Uppy?
just a new unlock. What was that?
Keepy Uppy? That's we played that through the pandemic.
Yep, yep. Magic Xylophone has been a huge hit. But yeah, I even did you know about the episode Sleepy Time? Have you heard
Um,
about?
which was the what's the premise?
So it's basically the story about Bluey and her whole family like going to bed at night, and it kind of goes some like dream sequency type stuff. But apparently, so IMDb allows you to rate individual episodes of specific shows. And Sleepy Time from Bluey has been one of the fastest ascending, highest rated episodes of any
Oh,
TV show in IMDb history, which is, I think, kind of speaks to the
it's really imaginative. If I remember,
very,
there's something about, Bluey or Bingo being a bat. I do remember the episode.
yeah, yeah, it's great. It's great. We've been doing a lot of Bluey. Also, this is not for kids. I've been watching Blue Eyed Samurai. That's been
Good.
really interesting. Have you heard of it?
I have, it's animated, right? And I've seen some reviews on it on YouTube. I kind of wish I didn't, but I wouldn't have known about it unless I saw the reviews. It's always
Right,
so
right.
cool.
Yes, yeah. Well, as a mixed race person myself, I think that it's really kind of cool to see mixed race narratives. And then also, it just does some really beautiful storytelling. It is pretty gory at various points, and it kind of has some challenging topics. But I think a lot of it's like very artfully done storytelling. I haven't seen the final episode yet, so I, don't give it my full sign off. And then I've been reading the Wheel of Time series. That's been
Hmm,
a thing for me recently, where it's been really, really done, well done world building. And I think I got into it when they started doing the Wheel of Time Amazon series, which is fun, but it definitely diverges from the books a fair
hmm.
amount. But I do think it's a very well crafted story. And then also, I've been reading a bunch of stuff around storytelling, which has been really fun. Like Save the Cat about screenwriting and a couple of other YouTube tutorials about how to write kids stories. It's been fun.
That's nice. Who do you think I should interview next?
Oh, okay. So, question for you: what
Okay.
type of person do you want to interview? Is like a creative, someone who's doing stuff in AI?
I like someone that's interesting to talk to. I think you're fascinating to talk to. I think this went by really fast. And someone that wants to see people succeed in this next generation with AI. Because I think a lot of it, people are very, at least in the tech field, feeling like, oh, what's going to be left? There's always this idea that AI is going to take all the jobs away. But people that are maybe interested in discussing what the future will be in a more positive light.
Right, right, totally. Well, I have this fun Discord that I'm a part of, which is a bunch of AI builders. So there's a bunch of different fun and interesting people there, like someone who's, doing using AI to make tattoos
Oh,
or
that's
to screenplays. And they were all kind of brought together by a guy who is doing some AI infrastructure stuff too. So, selling the shovels of the this gold rush, I guess. So we can talk offline about all those different people because I think there's some really interesting applications. And it's also just fun to just be with a group of hackers who are just constantly looking at the tools and saying like, well, I'm patching together these different things and did you check out this new capability? This is jaw dropping. This isn't as good as I think it is.
how do
Um,
we make it work? How can we make this work is what the fun topic.
Yeah. Actually, one thing that's been interesting about that conversation has been in the AI world, there's all these models that are competing on context length windows, right? And as a result, there was a number of people who are working in the space of retrieval, embeddings, and trying to say, like, hey, like, how can we bring more context into our prompts? And then you just now have this ability to just generate ginormous prompts that just have all the context within them. And so a kind of whole area of business is kind of fading a little bit, or not even business, just, there was a bunch of technology investment going into retrievals, and now it's just like, yeah, context windows are just large enough. Don't worry about it. Shove it all in. So that was an interesting part of the discourse of the Discord.
Cool. Laura, thank you so much for being here. And this is a fascinating conversation. I'm sure my audience will have much to say about it.
Great. Well, I'm very excited to hear what they have to say. And this conversation has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks.